Are you a lifelong fan of General Hospital?
Are you a new fan who wants to know more about the history of the show?
Do you enjoy talking about the show with others?
Do you find yourself yelling at the TV?
Is your self-care an hour a day in Port Charles?
If so, we invite you to join hosts
Amanda Kimmel
and Shannon Coach at the place where all the hidden conversations take place and secrets are revealed.
Meet us at Pier 54,
a General Hospital fan podcast.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the Port Charles 411. Today we're getting there. It's Lucky Spencer part 40, Lucky and Liz part 50. We are covering October 3rd through December 23rd, 2011. In episode 49, we had Siobhan passed away. She was murdered by Anthony Zaccara. Lucky relapsed because of Anthony Zaccara. One of his guys shot him up, which we discussed was quite the jump from Hills.
Mm-hmm.
And then Maxie and Liz had been kidnapped, but then escaped. And so they had been kidnapped by Anthony's men. But Lucky was really not too happy with Liz kind of at this time because he thought that Liz could have done something to save Siobhan.
Mm-hmm.
So we pick up where Lucky is at his apartment. He is staring. And we ended where he found an envelope.
Yes.
Yes. So now we're going to find out what's in the envelope because he's sitting there staring at it. He couldn't bring himself to open it. Doing so would make her death feel final. His thoughts were interrupted when Ethan arrived to... Wow, can I read? His thoughts were interrupted when Ethan arrived with the damaged portrait of Laura. And that's from Windermere. Lucky wanted to know where it had come from, and Ethan explained that he had gone to Windermere. No, that was the one I'm thinking of is the one that Stefan.
Yeah.
Is that the same one?
I thought so.
Okay. Ethan joked about Lucky's struggles, pointing out that the pills were still on the floor, and Lucky admitted that he wasn't ready to get rid of them. Ethan described running into Helena at the castle. She had threatened him, tried to rattle him with unwanted advances, and even handed him a dagger, warning that there were things in Windermere she feared. Helena was afraid of anything?
I was going to say, Helena's the scariest thing in that castle, hands down.
Right. Right. He suspected she had slashed Laura's painting and mentioned that a glove of his had gone missing in the tunnels. Lucky dismissed it as one of Helena's tricks, though he wasn't comfortable with any of it. The brothers talked about Lulu. Lucky admitted their fight at the hospital had gone badly. That's right. And Dante had been shot, and Lulu, because Dante had gone in because Lucky had left when Siobhan died. So then Dante was shot. So instead of being there for her, he had made it even worse. Ethan reminded him that Lulu still loved him and would come around. Lucky couldn't let go of his guilt, especially when it came to Siobhan. He showed Ethan the unopened envelope and explained he wasn't ready to face what was inside. Ethan urged him to read it, believing it would help him move forward. At the hospital, Mac told Dante to focus on his recovery and revealed that Lucky had resigned from the force. Lulu was shaken when she heard the news, but tried to insist that her brother was fine. Dante pushed her to reconnect with Lucky, but Lulu admitted she had told her brother it should have been him in the hospital bed instead of Dante. Dante urged her to forgive him, but the rift between them remained. At the Haunted Star, Ethan confronted Luke about his absence and the pain it had caused his children. Luke claimed that he was sober and trying to change things. He admitted that he had been keeping tabs on them, but hadn't been ready to come back. Ethan told him not to return at all unless he was serious about staying. Yes, this is a common theme amongst these Spencer men.
Right.
Later, Lucky finally opened Siobhan's letter. She wrote that she wanted him to keep living without regret and to believe that there was still beauty left in the world. She included family keepsakes, a handkerchief, a rosary, and a handmade cross. Her note instructed him to take the rosary to her home, dip it in the pond under a full moon, and wait for a message to appear. Before Lucky could process his words, Luke showed up. Their talk was tense. Lucky said he accepted Luke's resignation as a father, while Luke insisted he wanted a fresh start. Remember, Luke had said to Lucky that if he wanted a father, he had to be one to himself or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Luke apologized for the things he had said and claimed that he had been sober for a month and handed Lucky an AA pamphlet. Lucky laughed bitterly, convinced it was just another performance, unwilling to believe that his father had really changed. Lucky asked Luke if he had seen Tracy. Luke admitted that he had and that he'd also spoken to Ethan. Lucky then warned his father to stay away from Lulu. He told Luke that she was too much like Laura, sensitive, strong on the outside, but fragile underneath. And the worst thing Luke could do was show up only to walk away again when it got hard. Luke pushed back, saying he had loved Laura deeply, but feelings change. He added that while romantic love might fade, he would always love Laura in some way. Lucky wasn't moved. He told Luke the best thing he could do for everyone was leave and not come back. Luke said he wanted to make things right, but Lucky asked how he planned to do that after everything he had said and done. He reminded Luke of the time he had come to him brokenhearted, only to hear Luke say that Jake's death had been liberating. Luke said he had regretted it, but Lucky cut him off, saying he didn't have the time or the energy for his father's guilt. He explained that every day was a struggle. After losing his father, his son, and his wife, the only thing he could do was keep himself from reaching for pills to numb the pain. Opening the door, Lucky told Luke he had nothing left to give. Luke suggested they help each other, but Lucky shut him down and told him to leave. Not long after, Ethan came by, inviting Luke to go to a movie and dinner. Lucky claimed he had other things to do, but Ethan could tell something was wrong. When he pressed, Lucky admitted that Luke had stopped in and left behind an AA pamphlet. Ethan thought it was a good sign, proof Luke was serious about staying sober, but Lucky disagreed. In his eyes, Luke had come back to town because he had run out of places to go and money to fall back on, not because he wanted to change. He warned Ethan that Luke would likely try to pull him into some kind of a scam. Ethan admitted Luke had already floated the idea, but he still believed their father carried genuine regret. Lucky didn't deny that, but he argued Luke's regrets always served his own purposes. He was certain Luke would disappear again the moment that it suited him. Ethan tried to reason with him, saying they all wrestled with demons, and Lucky pushed back. He said he had faced his demons head on and gotten help, while Luke had never taken responsibility. Ethan reminded him that not everyone's path looks the same, but before they could argue further, Ethan asked about the pills. Lucky realized Ethan was worried he would take them, so he picked up the hydrocodone, still sitting where he had left them, and handed them over, asking Ethan to throw them out. Ethan wanted to be sure Lucky wasn't planning to score more like he had threatened the last time. Lucky explained that seeing Luke had made something click for him. He didn't want to become like his father, running from one scheme or bottle to the next. That wasn't the life that he wanted for himself. Their conversation shifted when Lucky pulled out the envelope Siobhan had left for him. He explained to Ethan that inside had been keepsakes and instructions. She wanted him to go to Ireland, dip her rosary into a pond under a full moon where a message would appear. Ethan thought it was a bit dark for someone so young to plan something like that, but he admitted that it showed how much she had loved Lucky, even in preparing for the worst. Just then, Cam called. He told Lucky he didn't want to go to the pumpkin patch unless Lucky came with him. Lucky promised he would be there. Later, Lucky joined Liz, Cam, and Aiden at the patch. The boys picked out pumpkins, and afterward they all returned to Liz's house. Liz sent Cam to wash up and thanked Lucky for coming along, admitting that it felt good to have him there because the house felt less empty when he was around. Lucky smiled, but told her he had to go. Liz looked disappointed, saying she had hoped that he would stay for dinner. Lucky explained that he had plans for later, but promised he would pick up Cam from school the next day, and Liz asked if he really wanted to miss out on carving pumpkins with the boys. Taken off guard, she listened as Lucky admitted he couldn't keep pretending they were a family again.
Oof, that was painful. At Liz's house, she pressed Lucky to tell her why he had been pulling away. Lucky admitted he had wanted to explain himself the other night but hadn't gotten the chance. He told her bluntly that they couldn't go back to what they once were, which was why he had tried to start a new life with Siobhan. Liz bristled at the thought, hurt and thirsty. I can't read today either.
Wait.
Liz bristled at the thought, hurt that he was using Siobhan's memory as a shield to avoid giving their relationship another chance. She just died like 5 minutes ago, Liz. Right. Regardless, why don't you give him a chance to grieve? He shouldn't be jumping into something with you. We've done that before. How well does that work?
Not so much.
Liz reminded him that she and Lucky shared something deep and lasting, something Siobhan could never erase. Lucky shook his head, saying that what they had shared wasn't healthy. It had become toxic, not just for them, but for everyone around them. Liz pushed back, insisting they could do better now if they loved each other, they could rebuild. Lucky's voice softened, asking her not to push him into that corner again. Liz's eyes filled as she asked the question directly, "Do you still love me?" Lucky hesitated before explaining that they were stuck in a cycle, one even Siobhan had recognized. Their love, he said, had become like an addiction, something they kept going back to even when it was bad for them. Liz argued that his grief and guilt were twisting his perspective, but Lucky challenged her to deny that their relationship had been destructive. Liz refused, lifting up their wedding picture as proof that the two people in the photo had loved each other. Lucky said that that was in the past. Not ready to give up, Liz pulled out pictures of Cam and Aiden. Lucky's tone shifted. He reminded her that it wasn't fair to the boys to put them through another attempt at a relationship destined to fail. He promised he would always be there as their father, but he couldn't pretend to be her partner anymore. Liz's voice cracked as she realized what he was saying. Just not for me. Liz pointed out that when he had been drugged and at his lowest, he had gone to her because he knew she would find him. That meant something. Lucky admitted that yes, they shared a connection, but holding on to it only kept them both trapped. Liz insisted that being with her wouldn't betray Siobhan, that moving on didn't mean leaving her behind. Lucky finally told her the truth. He was leaving. Liz froze, asking where he was going, when he'd be back. Lucky admitted he didn't know, but what he did know was that he wasn't coming back to her. He explained that their pattern was like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. He called their love an adolescent fantasy. He reminded her of how she had been with Nicholas and how he had chosen drugs. Liz's heart shattered as she realized there was nothing left to say. Lucky apologized, not blaming her, but insisting he had to go. When he left, Liz's grief boiled over. She threw their wedding photo across the room, shouting that she was done with him. At his apartment, Lucky sat alone with Siobhan's letter. He read it again, placed it and her keepsakes in an envelope, and quietly packed his bag. He picked up his suitcase and walked out, determined to follow the path she had left for him. Later, Robin noticed Liz's foul mood and asked what was wrong. Liz admitted she and Lucky had fought, and now he was leaving town. Bitterly, she called Siobhan the tragic love of his life. Robin suggested Liz was lashing out because she still wanted Lucky, but Liz brushed it off. When she bumped into Matt, he seized the chance to invite her to a party, and she accepted, if only to distract herself. I'm sorry, I love Liz and Lucky, we know this, but she was not in love with him enough that she wasn't with Nicholas and then had to work through all her stuff. But I swear it's like days after Siobhan dies and she's back to, oh, I'm supposed to be the love of your life.
Yeah. Well, because we talked about this too, that the whole thing with Maxie was because of the pills. Like I think if he were sober, that would not have happened. She soberly slept with Jason. She soberly, drunkenly slept with Jason.
Right.
Well, no, she wasn't drunk. They had like 2 beers, right? Wasn't it just
right. Yeah, she wasn't drunk. I mean, they had drank, but she was not drunk. And she wasn't drunk all the times that she was with Nicholas.
No.
So not that pills excuse Lucky having an affair, but he was not quite of sound mind, and she was. So
there was a big difference. Yeah.
I understand that she wanted him back, but for her to be so bitter about it that 5 seconds after Siobhan died, he's not like, oh yeah, that would almost be insulting if he was like, oh yeah, now that Siobhan's dead, can we get back together? Like, come on.
Right.
Anyway, meanwhile, Ethan brought the restored painting of the mysterious woman he had found at Windermere to Lucky's loft. He asked how Liz factored into Lucky's decision to leave. Lucky admitted that after discovering Aiden was his son, and after Liz had cared for him during his recovery, they had fallen back into similar patterns, but he didn't trust it. His feelings for Liz were still strong, maybe as strong as ever, but he feared repeating old mistakes. Ethan urged him to follow his heart, but Lucky explained that Siobhan's letter had asked him to go to Ireland, and he felt he needed to honor that. Later, Liz went to Lucky's apartment to give him a picture of Cam and Aiden from the pumpkin patch. Instead, she found Ethan, who told her Lucky had already left. Liz grew defensive and bitter, blaming Siobhan for always being in the way of her and Lucky's happiness.
Are you kidding me?
Right? Ethan disagreed. He told her that Lucky wasn't chasing ghosts. He was taking the time he needed to break free from their destructive cycle. Thank you, Ethan.
To grieve his wife's death.
Right. Liz countered, pointing out that when Lucky had been drugged, he had called for her. Ethan said that proved his point. Lucky's instinct to go to her was exactly what kept dragging them both down. Their argument shifted when Liz noticed the portrait of Laura. She accused Ethan of clinging to the past, but Ethan explained he'd only found it at Windermere and was returning it. Liz scoffed, accusing him of being just like Luke, drawn to Windermere and Helena's orbit. Ethan didn't deny the danger, but he turned the conversation back to Liz and Lucky. He told her that her relationship with Lucky was too much like Luke and Laura's. She kept trying to force Lucky into a role he couldn't fill. He pointedly told her that Lucky loved her the way he loved pills. It was something he craved but couldn't survive. Liz was offended, accusing him of insulting her, but Ethan stayed calm, saying he was being honest. He told her that if she didn't let Lucky go, she risked poisoning her own life and dragging her children into it. Liz snapped, insisting Lucky had cheated on her first. Ethan countered that Lucky had been strung out on drugs, then asked her, "What's your excuse?" He pointed out that she had 3 children by 3 different fathers. Liz was furious, asking if he was calling her a whore. Ethan denied it, but Liz said he didn't need to. Both Lucky and Siobhan already had. Ethan told her that wasn't true, but he pushed her again to face the truth, that she needed to let Lucky go, for herself and for her children. Liz's anger boiled over. She ripped up the picture of Cam and Aiden she had brought for Lucky and stormed out of the apartment.
Okay, so this is where they started changing the narrative because Lucky loved Liz.
Mm-hmm.
He was intrigued by Sarah, but once he got to know Liz, like they were absolutely in love.
Right.
So to say that he was addicted to her and stuff like that, I don't agree with that.
No, I don't agree with that either. Their original relationship, I mean, it was teenage because they were teenagers, but it was a true love for each other, of taking care of each other, of wanting what was best for each other. The fact that they kept coming back to each other, I can understand where Ethan's saying that that's toxic because of the way that it worked out.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that you knew that's how it was going to turn out. Right now, when she's trying to force Lucky to just forget about his last wife and go back to how things were, yeah, that's not healthy. But that's for a whole nother set of reasons.
Right. And I don't know. This is where they're trying, because it said something about you can't make him fit the mold or something like that. And I think that's where we're supposed to start thinking this is where the wandering Lucky is coming from, that no, he left because, you were sleeping with his brother, not because he wanted to. He had to mentally take care of himself.
Right. Originally, he did fit the mold. All he wanted was to be her husband and take care of those kids. The drug addiction threw them off course, but she definitely did not make matters better by starting to hook up with his brother, of all people.
Nope, not in the slightest. So then at the Haunted Star, Luke asked Ethan about the portrait of Laura. Ethan admitted he had taken it after talking with Lucky and realizing how little he had known about Luke and Laura's history. His curiosity had led him to Windermere. Luke warned that curiosity could be dangerous and told Ethan a story about sneaking a drink from his father's whiskey bottle as a kid, how he'd been punished and then tempted again, learning that some things draw you in only to destroy you. He compared that to his relationship with Laura. He had been intoxicated by her. She had loved him, but in the end, they had poisoned each other. Yes, he had been intoxicated by her because that's pretty much exactly what he says when he tells the kids what he did to her.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think Lucky's like Laura in this. All Laura wanted was to love Luke, have the family.
Right.
And Lulu's more like Luke.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. Except for the whole wandering the world thing.
Right.
Luke reflected on what he and Laura had shared had once been real, but it became an illusion. When Ethan asked about Holly, Luke said some relationships come from chance and circumstances, not love. What?
Yeah, we're like rewriting everything here because that's not really what him and Holly were either.
He loved Holly. It's not his fault he died in the avalanche.
Right.
If anything, Robert and Holly's relationship came from circumstance and not love because he got with her to keep her in the country so that she wasn't alone carrying Luke's child.
Mm-hmm.
But then she miscarried. But then she didn't, because now we have Ethan. Jeez. He admitted that he and Laura had created children with others out of need. Ethan with Holly and Nicholas with Laura.
No. That's not how Nicholas came to be either, but okay.
Ethan called it his birthright. Man, I wish I had watched this so that... Okay. Luke didn't apologize, saying it was better to grow up disillusioned than to be shattered later. I don't know. He said that's what had happened to Lucky, who grew up idolizing Luke and Laura's love only to learn the truth. Okay, that's true. Mm-hmm. However, Luke didn't rape Holly, so that's a difference.
Right.
Luke told Ethan that he had seen Lucky recently and realized that his son twisted everything Luke said in order to prove himself. Luke considered leaving town again, but Ethan argued Lulu couldn't handle losing her brothers and her father all at once. Ethan then revealed Lucky had already left. Luke worried he'd be blamed, but Ethan said Lucky had chosen to go before he and Liz destroyed each other the way that Luke and Laura had. Luke asked if anyone else knew. Ethan admitted that Liz did, but she hadn't taken it well. Luke wasn't surprised. Lucky and Liz had been circling each other for years. Circling each other? This isn't like a shark. Ethan said that Liz acted like Lucky wasn't good enough, and Luke agreed, pointing out that she had children with other men, but Lucky had forgiven her. Okay, Cameron was Xander's, which was before...
Right, they weren't together then, right?
No, they weren't. They weren't together. I mean, it was after Lucky, but it was before, like, they were not together.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, guys, come on. Ethan wondered why she kept clinging to him, and Luke compared it to Laura hanging on to him. Hope keeps people holding on until something finally breaks. When Luke asked where Lucky went, Ethan explained about Siobhan's letter. Liz had accused Siobhan of manipulating Lucky from beyond the grave, but Ethan believed she had given Lucky something to run toward instead of away from. Luke admitted that he had liked Siobhan. She craved freedom, hated hypocrisy, and left her mark. Their attention shifted back to the portrait. Ethan said that he had found it damaged on the floor at Windermere and had repaired it. Luke told him that to take it back and lock it away because it had been painted while Laura was a prisoner. Windermere, he warned, was filled with pain, and something from that place clung to anyone who lingered there. Meanwhile, on the dock, Spinelli suggested that Liz and Matt were getting closer, which sent Maxie spiraling. She accused Liz of throwing herself at Matt to get back at her for sleeping with Lucky years earlier. As Spinelli tried to get their boat started, Maxie ranted about Liz's past, her marriage to Lucky falling apart during his pill addiction, Liz sleeping with Jason, keeping secrets about her children's paternity, and then her affair with Nicholas. Spinelli tried to calm her, but Maxie was convinced that Liz was always playing the victim and was now after Matt. When Spinelli admitted that he had accidentally stranded them on a sandbar, Maxie snatched the oars, desperate to stop Liz. She accused Spinelli of siding with Liz, called Liz names, and claimed that if Matt cheated, it would be Spinelli's fault. Frustrated and insecure, she turned her anger on both Liz and her own failing job. Matt confided in Liz about his struggles with Maxie, but Lucky's story was unfolding far from Port Charles. Lulu went searching for her brother at the Haunted Star, only to learn from Ethan that Lucky had already left town. Ethan explained that Lucky needed distance from Liz and that Siobhan's death had sent him on a difficult path. He also showed Lulu the letter Siobhan had left, filled with strange instructions that unsettled even him. Why wouldn't Lucky have taken that with him? By the time Lucky arrived in Ireland, he had checked into a small inn and immediately reread Siobhan's letter. So then what did Lulu look at?
Right.
I don't know. Okay. Maybe he just told her about the letter.
Maybe.
He carried the rosary, handkerchief, and Rowan crucifix she had left, examining each item carefully and tried to make sense of her instructions. When he asked the innkeeper about St. Margaret's Chapel, her hesitation and uneasy tone confirmed the place had a reputation, but Lucky was determined to follow Siobhan's guidance. Every detail of her letter seemed intentional, every instruction a thread connecting him to her memory. That evening, Mrs. McInerney, which I'm assuming is the innkeeper, visited him in his room. She explained that the crucifix was meant to shield him from the Watchers, mysterious guardians who protected the chapel's secrets. Lucky listened closely, asking questions and comparing her warnings with Siobhan's words. He showed her each item, and though skeptical of superstition, he understood that Siobhan had intended him to act with care. Mrs. McInerney urged him to reconsider, warning that the chapel had a history of misfortune, but Lucky insisted on continuing. As night fell, he made his way through the misty Irish countryside toward the chapel. The air felt heavy, and a lone wolf howled in the distance. At the gates he paused, gripping the rosary for reassurance before pushing them open. Inside, the ruins were quiet except for the faint echo of the wind through the broken walls. He found the hole struck by lightning described in Siobhan's letter and sat down, holding the rosary, rereading her instructions, waiting for signs that would tell him how to proceed. Fatigue finally overcame him, and he drifted into a light, restless sleep. When he awoke, the atmosphere had shifted. Stones near his feet formed a single, clear word: go.
Well, that's not creepy at all.
No, not at all.
Though Liz's grandmother and brother were helping with Cam and Aiden, Matt urged Liz to reach out to Lucky for childcare. Liz resisted, not wanting to disrupt him in Ireland while he pursued Siobhan's final wishes. She admitted she couldn't call him home without validating Siobhan's harsh assessment of her emotional needs, how she had once called Liz a black hole for Lucky's soul. In Ireland, Mrs. McClerney insisted she hadn't left it and advised Lucky to leave, sensing danger. I'm assuming they're talking about the go sign. But he ignored her and settled by the well. Exhausted, he eventually fell asleep, and when he awoke, the stones had spelled "go home." Bewildered, Lucky confided in Mrs. McCurney about the repeated message. She suspected that his grief, guilt, and lack of sleep might be influencing what he was seeing. Lucky rejected that idea, insisting that he had traveled all the way to Ireland to fulfill Siobhan's wishes, not for personal absolution. The innkeeper then shared her own story. After her husband died young, she had visited the well for a message from him. Still waiting more than 2 decades later, she emphasized that messages from beyond were mysterious and required faith. She encouraged Lucky to set aside disbelief, listen with his heart, and pay attention on the last night of the full moon, hinting that the well held more to reveal. Following her advice, Lucky returned to the churchyard that night. He placed Siobhan's rosary in the well, sat nearby, and eventually fell asleep. In a dream, he held Aiden, assuring his young son that everything would be okay. When he awoke, a new message was spelled in stone: "Go home, Daddy." Startled, he realized the message was from his son, Jake. Meanwhile, back in Port Charles, Liz spoke with Lulu about how eager she was to go home to see her sons. Unaware that Lucky had traveled to Ireland, Lulu reminded her that love had always connected Liz and Lucky and urged patience. Liz reflected on their imperfect relationship, torn between idealistic dreams and harsh realities, and cautioned Lulu not to use their past as a model for her own relationship with Dante. In the hospital, Liz's fever spiraled into delirium. She hallucinated that Matt had saved her from being thrown overboard, though he corrected her. Hearing Jake calling, she became frantic. Monica sedated her while Jason stayed close to comfort her. Once stabilized, Liz realized the experience had been a fever dream and thanked Jason. How many times have you had a fever dream in your life that crazy things like that happened? I've never experienced the things that they describe in their fever dreams.
But to be fair, she just went through something absolutely devastating that neither of us have.
That's true. That's true. The Jake stuff
Jake.
maybe, but I feel like they use that fever dreams often, and I'm sorry, but I know whenever you're sick, you're kind of hallucinating-ish, but not the level that they describe it.
Yeah.
Lucky returned to the inn, still unsettled by the churchyard message. Mrs. McGurney urged him to remain in the village and pay close attention to what the spirits might be trying to communicate, particularly regarding Jake. Lucky recounted the dream and the stone message, realizing that the signs were guiding him back home to his son. But he didn't know his son was alive at that time, so...
It's his spirit. That's what she just said. The spirits.
This is guiding him back home to his son.
He knew that Aiden was his son.
Oh, I'm thinking Jake. I'm thinking that it was telling him to go back to Jake, because Jake was...
No, Jake was telling him to go home.
Okay. Lucky slept and dreamed of Siobhan, who scolded him for being stubborn and not believing in love. She told him he needed to listen because Jake had something to say. Siobhan warned him not to resist and promised to have the last word if this was their final encounter. She put on her hat, moved to the window, and disappeared as a loud noise startled Lucky awake. He noticed her hat on the floor, and with Mrs. McCurney also awake, accepted her offer of tea and understanding before returning to the churchyard. At the churchyard, Lucky called out to Jake, asking for forgiveness for not being there, not protecting him, and not saving him from the car. Exhausted, he fell asleep by the wall. When he awoke, a message spelled out in stones, "Go home, Daddy. Aiden." Lucky was desperate to understand what Jake was trying to tell him. Meanwhile, back in Port Charles, Steve checked on Liz, who was recovering from being drugged and thrown overboard by Lisa. Liz hadn't heard from Lucky, and Steve noted it was unfair planning to speak to him when he returned from Ireland. Ethan reassured Liz that her sons were safe with relatives, though she noted that their father wasn't there. He reminded her that Lucky was honoring Siobhan's final request, and Liz marveled at how Siobhan had managed to influence him even from the grave. Liz also warned Ethan to avoid Windermere, a place tied to loss and danger, where her best friend Emily had been killed and she herself had been unfaithful to Nicholas. Those are two different things, girlfriend, though.
Two very different things, yes.
At the Weber residence, Lulu tried to help Aiden process feelings of abandonment, knowing what it was like for him when Lucky had left. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Lulu's father, Luke, had returned. Lulu was shocked that he hadn't informed her and was angry that he seemed more focused on meeting Aiden than visiting her. Of course, Lulu would be upset that everything wasn't about her. Luke explained that Lucky, Ethan, and Tracy had advised him to stay away, believing it would be best, but Lulu felt betrayed, arguing that she had never given up on him and deserved his attention. Luke, confused, assumed she had her own family now and didn't need him, which only deepened Lulu's frustration. Back in Ireland, Lucky read the stone message again. "Go home, Daddy. Aiden," and became desperate for clarity. Frustrated, he kicked at the stones until they disappeared. Moments later, he awoke to see a red knit cap on the fence near the well and a new message on the ground. "Go home, Daddy. Aiden's sick. Hurry." Panicked, Lucky called Liz's house, but the answering machine picked up. He began leaving a message, but Luke answered, realizing Lucky was in distress. Lucky quickly explained the urgency without detail, instructing Luke to take Aiden to the hospital immediately. Luke noted that Aiden only had a bruise on his arm, but Lucky insisted on medical attention, unwilling to take any chances. Lucky called Luke urgently, making sure he hadn't been drinking, and reminded him there was an extra car seat in the house. Oh, I love that! He instructed Luke to get Aiden to the hospital quickly but safely. After hanging up, Lucky packed his belongings at the inn. Mrs. McGurney stopped by, sensing his urgency, and he explained that he had received a message compelling him to return home to protect his son. Once Lucky left, Mrs. McGurney went to the churchyard to speak with her late husband, Jamie. Seeing that Lucky had left some of Siobhan's belongings in the well, she gathered them to send to him. The wind stirred as she sensed a presence behind her, revealing a stone message. "Still yours." With tears, she whispered back, "Here and beyond." On the plane, Lucky noticed a bruise on his arm as he waited for takeoff, glancing at a cart of alcohol nearby. Meanwhile, Luke secured Aiden in the car seat, noticing the boy had a bruise in the same spot as Lucky. He reflected on how much Aiden resembled his father and admitted that kids and cars weren't his favorite combination, then drove towards the hospital. During the drive, Luke tried to reassure Aiden while his conscience appeared in the back seat, questioning his choices. Luke told his conscience to leave him alone, but it persisted, reminding him of the scotch he'd cracked open earlier in the spot where Jake had died. Luke recalled it was his wedding anniversary with Laura, and his conscience pressed him on past wrongs, the tragedy of Jake, divorcing Tracy, and whether he had truly committed to sobriety. Luke defended himself, insisting he had faced addiction seriously and had made progress. His conscience challenged him to consider the people he had hurt and the amends he owed, but Luke maintained that only Jake mattered and that Lucky had handled his own life responsibly. As the conversation turned to spiritual awakening and contact with God, Luke laughed but fell silent when he nearly hit something in the road. His conscience reminded him of past sins, abandoning the Spencer children, hurting Laura. But Luke insisted he only wanted to see his grandson. When the conscience pressed him about drinking while driving, Luke yelled for it to stop, focusing on the road until suddenly headlights startled him. Back in Port Charles, Lulu realized Luke and Aiden were missing. She called Ethan but reached voicemail, then tried Lucky, also to no avail. Tracy arrived, and together they pieced together that Luke might have taken Aiden to the hospital. They rushed there but found no record of his admission. Then they spotted Luke, serious and somber, and demanded to know what had happened. On the plane, Lucky tried to calm himself, acknowledging his fears, but trusting he had no other choice. He fell asleep and dreamed of Siobhan, who appeared beside him. Lucky thanked her for warning him about Aiden and asked why she had written the letter. Siobhan expressed that the McKennas had a connection to death and she had sensed her time was ending. Lucky admitted she had expected her to send a message, but Siobhan pointed out he had assumed it would come from her, not realizing it could come from someone else he loved.
Lucky questioned whether the dream of Siobhan was real or just a trick in his mind. She smiled, reminding him that his head, heart, and soul were all connected, and the very fact that he was dreaming of her was proof of something greater at work. She admitted that he had been fighting himself so fiercely that she had to reach out, and even in death, her presence had a purpose. Lucky struggled with the idea of God's will, and Siobhan told him that her death was meaningful and that he could feel it in his heart, even if he didn't understand all the answers. They spoke about Jake and the gift of life that he represented. Lucky reflected on his own fears and responsibilities, particularly about Aiden, unsure if his son was truly sick and questioning whether leaving him in Luke's care had been wise. Siobhan gently pointed out that his reckless impulses, the dark thoughts of hurting Liz or acting in rage, mirrored the traits that he had inherited from his father. Lucky admitted that part of him had been tempted to spiral out of control, to destroy the Spencer home, pop pills, and hurt Liz emotionally. Siobhan reminded him that Liz still loved him, and she encouraged him to see his current actions, entrusting Aiden to Luke as a test of faith, a measure of his ability to protect and trust. Their conversation turned to faith itself. Lucky confessed that he had lost faith over the years, but Siobhan insisted that faith never disappears, it is tested. Each leap of faith, she explained, makes a person fuller, and even when prayers go unanswered or people betray one another, it matters that one continues to pray and act. She warned that his heart was shrinking under doubt and fear, but she also pointed out that his concern for Aiden was proof that he still believed and cared deeply. Lucky admitted that he was exhausted, frustrated by uncertainty, and tired of the way that he had constantly wrestled with guilt, responsibility, and loss. Siobhan challenged him to stop deflecting with humor and face what was in front of him. She examined the red knit cap in her hands, noting how worn it had appeared, much like Lucky's faith. She reminded him that even though he questioned whether the warnings about Aiden were real, his instinct to act and prayers were signs that he still had faith. Lucky reflected that he had once had faith, lost it, and now was being tested in how much he could endure and protect those he loved. Siobhan smiled, telling him she couldn't provide all the answers, but that the lessons were unfolding and that each test would shape him as long as he kept listening to his heart. Through their conversation, Lucky found a strange sense of clarity. He understood that fear, doubt, and guilt he felt were part of the journey of love, loss, and responsibility. He realized that protecting Aiden and honoring Siobhan's last wishes would required trust, action, and faith, even with the outcome being uncertain. By the time the dream faded, Lucky carried with him the quiet conviction that he had to act, guided by the lessons Siobhan had imparted and the instincts of a father who would not let fear or doubt dictate the fate of his children. Meanwhile, in Port Charles, Liz was on the mend, though still at the hospital. Matt reassured her that everyone was helping with Cam and Aiden, but Liz worried about going home without Lucky there. She acknowledged the deep connection she shared with Jason through Jake and recognized Lucky as the father of her sons. Liz also clarified her feelings for Matt, explaining that his earlier kiss had been circumstantial, and she affirmed that his true affections lay elsewhere, while Maxie's feelings were genuine. Lulu and Tracy were focused on Aiden. When they discovered Luke had taken him to the hospital at Lucky's request, they grew concerned. Luke explained that Lucky hadn't shared the reason and admitted that he had been delayed by car trouble caused by another driver. Lulu pressed, skeptical that Aiden was truly sick, suggesting Lucky's warning seemed too convenient. Tracy reminded her that what mattered was Aiden's safety, and Luke assured them Lucky was on his way home. Steve updated Luke, Tracy, and Lulu that Aiden's bruises were unusual, prompting a specialist to examine him. Concerned, Lulu decided Liz needed to know and excused herself to the hospital. After Steve left, Luke tried to leave as well, but Tracy stopped him. She asked pointedly if he wanted a drink, realizing he hadn't, and reminded him he was sober. She then pressed him on why he had been at Liz's house. Luke admitted he had gone to see his grandson, seeking some hope for the Spencer family. Tracy challenged him to recognize that Aiden was his blood, urging him to stay involved and reminding him he wasn't beyond redemption. Robin reported to Aiden. Oh my gosh. Robin returned to report that Aiden's bruising had worsened and the tests were underway. She noted that Luke might have saved Aiden's life by acting quickly. Meanwhile, Steve spotted Maggie, who was anxious to confirm her suspicions and wanted the test results as soon as possible. At the hospital, Lulu gently broke news to Liz that Aiden had been admitted. Liz initially suspected that Lucky might be overreacting out of guilt for not being with the boys, but Lulu assured her that something serious was happening. Monica stepped in when Liz insisted she needed to be with her son. Lucky arrived soon after, anxious and tense, having followed Siobhan's guidance and mysterious message from Jake. Tracy explained that Aiden had received a blood transfusion and was now stable. Lucky held Aiden, quietly grateful, and reflected on how everything from Siobhan's warning to Luke's answering his call had guided him to this moment. He thanked Siobhan and Jake, feeling a mix of disbelief and relief that it had all worked out. Luke remained in the waiting area, still wrestling with guilt and the weight of responsibility. Tracy approached him and offered pointed advice. She told him he couldn't continue running from his past or hiding behind cynicism. She reminded him that he had a role in his grandson's life and urged him to be present, not just for Aiden, but for the rest of the family. Tracy emphasized that acknowledging he had the good he could do, like taking Aiden to the hospital, was crucial for his redemption. She also warned him that he needed to be mindful of his sobriety and actions, noting that Lucky was on his way and would see him as he truly was. At the Haunted Star, Luke attempted to downplay his actions with humor, but Tracy pressed him to recognize the significance of saving Aiden's life. She questioned whether he would have acted as responsibly if alcohol had been involved, highlighting the stakes of his choices. She advised him not to isolate himself during Thanksgiving and to embrace the connection he still had. Luke tried to deflect, but Tracy reminded him that true progress came from facing reality, taking responsibility, and being present for family. When Lucky arrived at the bar, he quietly observed Luke reaching for the bottle of scotch. Recognizing his father's struggle, Lucky didn't confront him and left the room. Luke waited until Lucky had left to cap the bottle, reflecting on Tracy's warning and the lesson from his grandson's crisis. Later, Tracy checked on Aiden with Maggie, relieved to see the boy recovering, and thanked her for her help. Anthony caught up to Tracy, curious about the family's recognition of her efforts. She pushed past him, determined to stay focused on supporting the Spencers, particularly Lucky and Aiden, and ensuring that the family stayed safe and connected.
At the hospital, Lucky arrived with Aiden in his arms, walking into Liz's room with a mix of exhaustion and relief. Liz was startled but overjoyed, admitting she feared it might all be a dream and preferring to have both father and son there. Lucky is still processing everything from his trip to Ireland, and the message from Siobhan gave only a cryptic, long story when Liz asked how he had known Aiden was sick. He stayed close to Liz, quietly letting the moment sink in, the weight of what had happened, both the signs from Siobhan and the near disaster with Aiden, still heavy on his shoulders. He promised Liz that he would be present for both Cam and Aiden, even if he couldn't be there for every small moment, emphasizing that being there consistently mattered more than trying to control everything. Later, he returned with Cam, letting the boys spend time with their mother. Seeing Cam's delight and Aiden's calm after his ordeal, Lucky allowed himself a brief smile, realizing that despite all the chaos, he had managed to guide his family safely through a near tragedy. At the nurse's station, Lucky thanked Maggie for her role in saving Aiden. Still shaken from his frantic journey home, he admitted that he felt signs from Siobhan during his time in Ireland, messages that had pushed him to return and trust that he could protect his son. Maggie reflected on how hope and love often worked in unseen ways, especially for children, and Lucky felt a sense of awe at how everything had aligned, from Siobhan's guidance to Luke's reluctant but critical help. Later, Ethan caught up with Lucky in the waiting area. Lucky reassured him that Aiden was recovering quickly, but confessed that he was worried about Liz, who was still clinging to the dream of reuniting their family. He spoke about the restless thoughts he carried, how alcohol would not ease them, and how he intended to focus on the things in life he could control. He also reflected quietly on how Siobhan's guidance had forced him to confront his own doubts, his faith, and his responsibility as a father, reinforcing that being present was the most important thing he could do. Meanwhile, Maggie explained to Liz that Luke had taken Aiden to the hospital. Luke, uneasy, avoided taking credit, but Monica confronted him about past mistakes, smacking him across the face in frustration, an act that Lucky observed in silence. Later, Liz confronted Luke herself, furious and protective. She warned him to stay away from her boys, blaming him for caring only about Aiden because he was Lucky's son, while neglecting the others. Lucky quietly witnessed the confrontation, feeling gratitude for his father's actions, but understanding Liz's anger, reflecting on how much responsibility rested on him to keep his family safe and together. Liz erupted at Lucky, her voice sharp with anger and pain. She accused him of defending Luke, blaming him for everything Luke had taken from their family, especially robbing Jake of his future. The words spilled out faster than Lucky could respond, and Liz's fury overwhelmed her. She collapsed to the floor, shaking with emotion, and Epiphany quickly appeared with a wheelchair, helping Liz back to her hospital room. Luke turned to Lucky, insisting it was his turn to speak. Lucky replied that he had already said everything he needed to. Luke pressed, reminding Lucky that he had promised sobriety as a condition to move forward. Lucky, however, remained skeptical, unwilling to trust Luke's sudden claims. Luke argued that Liz's emotional state was understandable, given everything she had endured, and warned Lucky not to repeat the mistakes he had witnessed in Luke and Laura's relationship. Lucky asked if the mistake was falling in love or letting go, but Luke walked away without answering. Back in her room, Liz tried to regain control, apologizing to Patrick for her near-death drowning incident, though he insisted it wasn't her fault. Lucky arrived, his presence calm but weighed with experience. He told Liz about his journey to Ireland, explaining that he had gone because of a letter from Siobhan, but instead of receiving a message from her, he had been guided by Jake's concern for Aiden. Liz recognized it as a sign from Jake and urged Lucky to seize the second chance they had, emphasizing that both Aiden and Cam wanted a full family. Lucky admitted he feared losing her again and that he wasn't strong enough to risk it, but Liz pleaded with him, insisting this was different. Aiden's life, their family, their chance to a fresh start. Lucky tried to temper her optimism, warning her not to read too much into the moment. He explained that his trip to Ireland had been about facing guilt over Siobhan's death and that the message he received was only about Aiden. Liz argued that life was moving forward and that happiness shouldn't be deferred because of the past. She reached for his hand, urging him to stop punishing himself, but Lucky pulled away, reminding her that his history had been painful and complicated. Liz pressed, insisting that he couldn't have it both ways, wanting to appear as a loving father while avoiding full commitment to his children. Lucky promised to always be present for Cam and Aiden, emphasizing his hands-on approach, but Liz demanded more: consistency, dedication, and a willingness to make the family whole. No, sorry, Liz, you cannot use your kids to get the family that you want. Absolutely not. If he swears he's going to be present for the kids, and he obviously was in this case, you cannot tell him he has to have all or nothing. It does not work that way.
Right.
The conversation grew heated as Liz confronted Lucky about leaving for Ireland without properly saying goodbye to the boys. Lucky argued that he had been honest with her about his plans, but Liz countered that he had been vague and had treated her the same way Luke had treated Laura, running from responsibility. She accused him of thinking like an addict, pushing her away, and tempting himself to relapse daily, which Lucky admitted had been true. Liz reminded him that Ethan had said he had pushed her away out of love, and Lucky confirmed that while he would always love her, their connection was codependent. Liz rejected the idea of waiting for him to get it together, reminded him that love alone wasn't enough, and that he couldn't use their sons as an excuse for inaction. Lucky stressed that the past couldn't be rewritten, that he could only move forward, but Liz argued that he was punishing himself instead of embracing a fresh start. She accused him of prioritizing his late wife over his living children and reminding him that she was capable of managing as a single mother with support from friends and family. Lucky tried to reason, suggesting they could take a break to find themselves, but Liz insisted they couldn't keep circling in this limbo. She demanded accountability and honesty, refusing to let him manipulate their situation. Lucky left the room to fetch the doctor, which Liz interpreted as another excuse to escape. Moments later, she left her hospital bed, leaving a scrawled message on her pillowcase in red lipstick: "Can't do this."
Okay, so
Go ahead.
He was very clear about we can't be back together. We can't be back together.
Yeah, and she's like, you can't keep going back and forth. He wasn't going back and forth. He was there for his kids, and he was telling you consistently that he does love you, but not in that way anymore because the relationship didn't work.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, at Shady Brook, Lucky tracked Liz down, confronting her about leaving without explanation. Liz admitted she had acted impulsively and insisted she needed therapy before confronting him. Lucky expressed concern and suggested counseling could help her process their past and understand his decisions. Liz rejected the notion that he could dictate her actions, insisting she needed space to heal. Lucky assured her that he would always care for her, but emphasized that he needed time to understand himself and what he truly believed. Liz countered, insisting that no matter what he did, he couldn't stop loving her, pointing out that he had inherited his compassion, sensitivity, and caring nature from Laura, which explained his recent struggles. Lucky argued that the past couldn't be changed, and Liz challenged him to accept the consequences of his choices, making it clear that he was free to leave, but she would never stop loving him. Okay, she can make that statement. That's fair.
Right.
She can only control herself. If she's not going to stop loving him, she's not. But he doesn't owe her anything else. Lucky was
And he's not trying to have it all. He's saying, I can't do this. I just lost my wife. I need to mourn.
Right. Oh, man. Liz is making this hard for me. Normally, I'm like all on the woman's side here, but she's like being crazy.
There were a few times during this recap of them that I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah. Lucky was determined to do right by Cam and Aiden, but he knew he couldn't fully be the father he wanted to be until he sorted out his own turmoil. In Liz's hospital room, he tried to explain this, but Liz cut him off, insisting that he didn't owe her an explanation. She reassured him that she and the boys were surrounded by support from family, friends, and even sarcastically hinting that Luke could pitch in since Lucky seemed to think so highly of him as a babysitter. Lucky argued that it didn't have to be so tense between them, but Liz, exhausted from loving him and constantly trying to convince him they could be happy, told him he could leave. She promised she would manage her recovery and their family, while Lucky assured her that he would check in on her in a few days and that Cam and Aiden would be fine with him. After leaving Liz's room, Lucky took Aiden to the hospital for a checkup, realizing how different it felt without Liz there. Sitting beside his son, he quietly promised that he would always be present and that his love for Aiden was unwavering. He reflected on his trip to Ireland, the letter from Siobhan, and the signs he'd received that had led him home, realizing that he had reinforced the urgency of being there for his children and giving them stability. Lucky's mind kept returning to Liz, to the fragility of their bond, and to the balance he had to strike between responsibility, love, and his own need for clarity. Meanwhile, Liz wandered the halls of Shady Brook and came across a man painting at an easel. She stopped, intrigued, and watched as he worked, eventually drawn into a quiet conversation with him. He offered her tea and gentle words about embracing life's ebb and flow, finding moments of excitement, and reconnecting with passion lost to hardship. Liz, still grappling with grief over the loss of one of her children and the near drowning she had survived, admitted that she had once loved painting and that it had spoken to her soul. She told him that the ocean had always been a source of inspiration for her, the color, the movement, the way it felt endless and free, and how she had almost drowned there, which had made her afraid to return. The man encouraged her to find that part of herself again, noticing how disconnected she had become from the world and from joy. Despite her initial intent to leave, she stayed, sipping the tea and allowing herself to experience a small moment of peace. Back at the hospital, Lucky ran into Matt, who didn't mince words. Matt reminded Lucky that Liz had endured terrifying experiences, being tossed overboard, nearly drowning, and now facing Aiden's serious health crisis, and argued that Lucky had made things worse by rejecting her. So it would have been better if he would have got back together with her now and then broke up with her when? When is he allowed to leave her?
And I mean, okay, so I understand that. I mean, right now we are seeing her have the mental break. Like, that is the purpose of all this. But
you could not let her rebuild her mental health on the idea that they were going to be together, because then once he broke up with her, she would have been devastated all over again.
Right.
Oh, Matt, come on. Lucky insisted he had only been honest, but Matt pressed the point, warning Lucky that he needed to channel his energy elsewhere rather than using Liz as an emotional punching bag. Lucky acknowledged the warning but quipped at Matt to go to hell, highlighting the tension between his defensive humor and the heavy responsibility he felt. Lucky also connected with Maggie, who had skillfully examined Aiden without disturbing him. She reassured Lucky that his son was healthy and reflected on the unpredictable nature of life and medicine. Maggie encouraged Lucky to focus on the ways people touch each other's lives, noting that some things, like signs, messages, or small miracles, couldn't always be explained but had real impact. Lucky considered her words carefully, understanding that while he couldn't control everything, the moments he did have with his children mattered deeply.
Liz was settling into Shady Brook, trying to focus on herself and her recovery. She found herself drawn to a man named Ewan, quietly painting in a room across the hall. His work caught her attention. There was something familiar in his colors and strokes, but when he covered the canvas, Liz stepped back. Matt caught her in the hallway, curious about her interactions and warning her not to get too close to strangers. Liz explained she was there for herself, not to manipulate anyone, and she pushed back against Matt's assumptions, though she appreciated his concern. Back in Port Charles, Lucky was busy making sure Liz's home felt welcoming for the holidays. With Maxie's help, he decorated carefully, thinking of the boys and Liz's comfort. Maxie encouraged him to help Liz focus on recovery, while Ethan reminded Lucky that he didn't have to overthink things. Sometimes taking a chance on what your heart wants is worth it. Lucky admitted he wanted a family with Liz and the boys, but worried about repeating past mistakes, especially after the time he had spent in Ireland and the messages he had received from Siobhan. He was determined to be a present and consistent father, even if it meant confronting his own fears. When Lucky arrived at Shady Brook, he was calm and patient with Liz, reassuring her that she wouldn't be alone for the holidays and that he would support Cam and Aiden. He tried to balance giving her space with being available, encouraging her recovery without pressuring her. Liz, meanwhile, was curious about Ewan's painting and briefly peeked at it despite his instructions not to. Lucky focused on Liz's well-being, gently guiding her while quietly managing his own concern about being overbearing. Lucky and Liz walked past Ewan's room when Lucky returned to get her. Inside, Liz noticed the easel was gone, replaced by a desk instead of a bed. Ewan entered wearing a sports jacket rather than the smock and introduced himself as Dr. Ewan Keenan, explaining that Liz was his patient, but they hadn't begun sessions yet. And by the way, we interviewed him.
Mm-hmm.
He handed over her card and mentioned he also did outpatient counseling. Liz and Lucky left together, arriving at her home where she admired the Christmas decorations. Lucky credited Maxie for transforming the house, and Liz thanked him for bringing her home so she could heal with her family. After sending the babysitter home, Liz invited Lucky to spend the night, and he agreed to sleep in the boys' room. Later, Lucky returned to the living room to tell Liz that the boys were asleep. Liz shared excitement for surprising Cam and Aiden in the morning, and Lucky warned her about Cam's new breakfast obsession and red shirt habit. Liz laughed, thanking Lucky for helping with the boys, and suggested a carousel visit that weekend. Lucky admitted he thought it would be good for her to have Christmas, and Liz added, and the family. When he tried to clarify, Liz cut him off, insisting Christmas was about family. Lucky handed Cam's Christmas list to Liz, and they reminisced about the past holidays. Lucky promised to return after doing some shopping. Maxie arrived in a foul mood, immediately confronting Liz about her role in Lucky's life. She accused Liz of manipulating Lucky by faking a breakdown to keep him around, referencing his past trauma with Laura. Liz tried to defend herself, but Maxie ranted about Liz using Lucky's love for his children. Lucky appeared in the doorway, and Liz insisted Maxie was wrong. Maxie left quietly after Lucky ordered her to, but Lucky confronted Liz, demanding the truth. Liz admitted she had taken advantage of the situation out of desperation. Lucky coldly pointed out she could have been honest. Liz argued Lucky hadn't been honest with himself about his feelings either, saying she couldn't bear losing him again. Lucky revealed he had lied too, convincing himself reconciliation was possible, but insisted it was over. He promised to return in the morning to explain things to the boys. Liz tearfully placed their wedding picture face down, mourning the loss. Lucky returned home and found a postcard from Ireland reading, "I hope you find what you're looking for," with the image of St. Margaret's Church. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Liz slapped Maxie for constantly undermining her family, warning her to stay out of her life. Maxie accused Liz of faking the breakdown and manipulating Lucky, while Liz countered that Maxie had made it her business. Matt intervened, clarifying Liz had been through a lot and wanted to keep Lucky in the boys' lives. Liz walked away after collecting a paycheck, ignoring Maxie's continued insults. Back at Liz's house, Lucky told the boys he had to leave town for Ireland, explaining he had been looking for something but couldn't finish in Port Charles. Cam was disappointed, but Lucky reassured him that he and Liz would always love them, even if they couldn't be together. Ethan realized Lucky planned to return to Ireland and discussed the timing and dangers with him, including the Cassadines' presence at Windermere. Liz later came home to find Ethan and realized that Lucky had left without saying goodbye, understanding he wanted to avoid hurting her. She admitted to faking her breakdown, calling herself the lowest of low. Ethan tried to reassure her that Lucky didn't see it that way. At the hospital, Liz sought help from Ewan, admitting earnestly, "I need help." At the airport, Lucky saw a woman with 2 children waiting for their father and thought of the family he had left behind. Later, at St. Margaret's altar in Ireland, Lucky reflected on the mystic message about Aiden and asked for guidance. When someone entered the yard, he asked, "Are you here to shore up my faith or shatter it?"
Oof.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That was it for Lucky until 2015.
Wow.
Yeah. So next week for part 51, we're going to be resharing the week, basically, that Jonathan Jackson was back to send off Luke.
So sad.
I know.
Like, I'm glad he came back for it, but it was sad.
It was sad. But in the meantime, you guys can join us on Monday as we recap this week's shows.
Have a good weekend.
And we'll meet you at the pier.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's show, we invite you to go to peer54podcast.com to subscribe on your favorite platform. Don't forget to leave us a review.
And you can also follow us on many social media channels. Just search for Peer 54 Podcast. Also, we are not perfect, so if there is something that we missed or messed up, just let us know by emailing us at peer54podcast@gmail.com.